if you have any questions that you really want answered, definitely just raise your hand and then we'll make sure to get to those first. But before we do introductions, let's just welcome them to class. All right, so I'm actually gonna let everyone introduce themselves. So Bailey will start with her.
Sure.
And then maybe you can just talk about your background from school to today. What's been the major milestones of your career?
Sure. Okay. Hi there. Can everyone hear me okay? I can also project. So I'm Bailey, and I went to Wazoo. Oh, rough way to start. But hey, this is my first time on this campus, actually. It's very nice, I have to say. Since school, I drove a submarine at Disneyland for like a year while I interned at some Special Olympics Southern California. And then I went to a PR agency for a couple years. And then I wanted to move back to Washington. So I ended up at a startup, fully not knowing what a startup was. It was just like the first job that I got. And so I was at a fitness technology startup called EveryMove for about a year. I got laid off and with a group of 9 people, and that startup no longer exists. And through those connections, I got the job at Glowforge, where I was employee number 8, and now we're at about 75, and we make a 3D laser printer.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Callie Pitchell. I'm currently a creative director at a full-service advertising agency here in Seattle. My path into marketing and advertising is a little non-traditional. I studied history as an undergrad, got a master's degree in American Studies, and I spent 2 years in a history PhD program. I thought I was going to be a professor, and I got a little exhausted of that experience and spending 10 years in the classroom and took a 1 semester leave and interned for free at an advertising agency. And I think I'm technically still on a leave, but that was 7 or 8 years ago now. And I've kind of bounced around a little bit from agencies to brands, B2C, B2B, but I feel the most comfortable in myself in an agency context.
Hi, my name's Jay. I'm currently a co-founder of Modus, but I guess where do I start? I studied physics in undergrad, and I also got a PhD in physics in grad school. So most of you might be wondering, like, what are you doing in marketing? I decided to make the jump in grad school because I always wanted to start my own company. But what I realized was, hey, I can make any program, I can make any hardware product, but how do I take this to market? No idea. So I did a stint at a consulting firm, but then I realized, consulting's cool, but I really want sort of hands-on experience and own sort of a cycle of getting a product to market from start to end. And T-Mobile was actually going through their Un-carrier sort of change right then. And I applied for a job within sort of the marketing strategy group that reports into a SVP there. And that's how I made the leap, and that's what brought me out here. And while I was at T-Mobile, I started using Peach. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Peach, the food delivery service. Then I thought, this is pretty cool. It could actually become something. So I just cold emailed the CEO there, and that's how I got the job. And yeah.
Awesome. All right, so for the first question, maybe Callie, you can actually keep it.
Okay.
A lot of people have just questions around, like, what are some of the skill sets that they should learn to develop if they want a career in marketing, especially at startup type companies? If you have a couple to recommend.
Yeah, so I would think, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think when you're an early employee at a startup, a kind of agnostic of role is having a willingness to do the things that fall outside of your core function. So if you think that you're going to go be employee number 8 or 6 or 7 and be the marketer, you will soon find out that will not be your only role. And not only do you have to be willing, you have to it's not seeking out the opportunities, but just filling in the spaces. At a startup, there are so many little cracks, headcount-wise, that it's I think a requirement in entering into a startup, knowing that it's not going to be cozy, it's not going to be tidy, you're going to have to do things you don't want to do that seem kind of unglamorous or uncomfortable. And I think that willingness to learn and to do the things that are required is really an important skill to develop, and at least to have your eyes wide open going into a role at a startup, knowing that that's going to be required of you.
Yeah. Definitely agreed. I feel like that's the main trope of startups that you hear is like ability to wear many hats, and it's really being a team player and running a crowd fund when you've never done one before, or PMing a group of software engineers when you're really not very technical. And you'll actually find when you do that some of your what you think are weaknesses, you actually might have hidden strengths in them, or sometimes not being the most technically savvy, you need to explain things to a group of software engineers the way that a marketer would, and then they turn out differently than they would if an engineer explained it to a group of engineers, sometimes for the better. So that sometimes can really work your advantage. Beyond that, what I'd say is, for me, I've really learned to not fall in love with any of my particular tactics that I'm working on, because at startups, things tend to change rapidly and iterate a lot. And so if I really had my heart set on executing, a specific campaign or strategy, and then something changes or is delayed or whatnot, and you don't get to do it, or you don't get to do it in the way that you thought you would, just being able to move quickly and save it for a rainy day, or maybe it's just not the way the company is going anymore. In both of the startups that I've been at, that type of thing happens a lot, and you can't take it personally. Like, love the things that you're working on while you're working on them, but be prepared to let go for the good of the company, because when you start to see that things aren't working or aren't going to scale, there's no point in kind of spinning your wheels.
Yeah, I agree with what both of you said. A couple of things that I want to add is, at a startup, when you're pretty early on, there are no other marketers in the group. And if there are, they have to play many roles. Like, for example, at Peach, a marketer would play a part in product, customer service, and work with the devs, and also do analytics to figure out what's going on. So at a startup, I would say you kind of have to do all that. First, you have to understand what your customers want, or if they're satisfied with your current product, give that feedback to the product team. So you're sort of wearing the product hat. What kind of value prop features do we need to add? And how do we convey that to, customers that we don't touch yet, to get them on board and acquire them, right? So you have to just be willing to learn, because a lot of stuff would be, a lot of it is common sense and just connecting with the customers and delivering what they want in a logical fashion. So just having the willingness to learn and execute quickly is pretty important. Yeah. And one of the things that was mentioned was, you can't be really stuck on an idea and just dig one hole for too long, because the startup scene just moves really quickly. If something doesn't work, you have to let it go and start over.
Do you recall something that you started but you couldn't actually execute because you changed the strategy?
Not. Oh yeah, there is one. So one of the things that we wanted to do at Peach was to start sort of tell a story behind the sort of the menu selection, the restaurants that we wanted to do. And what we found out, because what we thought was people wanted variety and wanted to learn more about new dishes, the food scene in Seattle and so on. And while that is true, when we did our customer survey, we got our new results back, overwhelmingly, people wanted sort of their favorites and they wanted their preferences. So we kind of scrapped that idea quickly before executing on it, although we did do small scale tests later on.
Yeah, I have kind of an extreme example of that, not at Glowforge, but at Every Move, which is the startup I was at before. I was hired for a B2C marketing role, which was about fitness. It was basically a social media platform to which you could connect all different types of fitness trackers. So if I have a Fitbit and you have a Nike Fuel Band and you have an Apple Watch, we all live on the same social media platform where we can be excited about how many steps we got, or log a weights workout or whatever, and we all have a common points platform that we can compete on leaderboards and earn fitness rewards. So I did that for a few months, and then they switched B2B, which I had really not as much interest in it, because it was very insurance company, it was about employee benefits. But, I was still, I loved the team and still liked the product and everything. So I ended up doing this like B2B get your employees moving campaign that like, honestly, if that's the role, originally I might have not applied for it, but now I had this like a little bit of niche experience in that I'm glad I just went with it.
So something that you all have mentioned is like really trying to make sure that you're delivering the right product to your customer. How do you go about doing all of that customer research when you're at a smaller company and you're resource constrained?
I can speak to that. I was really lucky when I first joined Joy, which is where I was before I came back to Belief Agency. I came on as a marketing headcount, but they didn't have anybody leading their customer support efforts. So I also built out their customer support team. So I was serving kind of those two functions at one time until we were able to bring on a headcount for customer support. But what I was able to do, which I feel like now that I look back on it, I hated doing it. I was talking to users every day. And Joy is a wedding website and app. So you're talking about women, for the most part, that was the bulk of our users are women who are planning their weddings, who are stressed. And if their wedding invites went to somebody's spam folder, like you don't want to talk to those women every day. But that time where I kind of had these overlapping functions, I had to learn, how do I leverage customer insights in order to inform my acquisition efforts? And so getting that really intimate understanding of brides and where their pain points are, I can't even imagine doing my job as a marketer without those insights. And so if you're not in a position where it's just kind of happens, like in a startup, that you might find yourself responding to customer emails and things like that. But if you're not, you should seek out those opportunities. If I was going to go to a startup today, the first thing that I'd want to do is I'd want to talk to 20 of our customers. I'd want to know everything about them. I'd want to know what type of music they listen to. I want to know where they get their news. I want to know where they get their takeout from. I want to know all these things about them that will help inform the way I think about and talk to our audience, and oftentimes our stickiest users. You can kind of I would get like a really great cross section of users, some who are, and I don't know if sticky, is that like something, should I talk more about what a sticky user is? Okay. So really kind of like your ideal customers, the ones that you see engaging with your product in the exact way you want them to. So for example, like Facebook, if you are sticky with Facebook, that you're probably using Messenger every day, you're using all sorts of parts of their products in the stack. So talk to people like that, but then also talk to the people who are slipping away, talk to the people who left your service for another one, and getting that really intimate understanding of the customer, what they want, what they need, what they don't want, is absolutely crucial for your job as a marketer. And like I said, I couldn't imagine doing my job without that insight.
Yeah, doing customer research at a startup is hard. At T-Mobile, you have millions of dollars that you can spend to, get contractors or just form your own internal team to do it. But at Peach, a project that I worked on was we wanted to reduce churn of our customers. We wanted to reduce bleed of people just leaving our service. And key thing in that was doing the customer research. We needed to understand, why are they unhappy, why are they leaving? We took sort of a 3-step approach, which was, the first one was just sending out a survey. Survey is really easy. You just design it on your own and you have a contact list of your customers. You send it out and they give feedback. Luckily, Peach had a very high engagement rate in terms of surveys. We sent something out and our response rate was about 36% via email, which is pretty high. But if you didn't have that, that's where things get tricky. That's when you have to reach out to a random sample of customers, smaller sample size, like 20, 30, and you bring them in for interviews and focus groups to really understand what's going on and try to understand their personas, profiles, and why they're not happy with Peach, what they want to see. The second step would be, then how do we sort of solve this issue? We would develop prototypes, mock-ups, and actually do a second focus group to test what sort of improvements we could introduce in terms of product or loyalty programs to get them re-engaged. And the third piece is just doing a small scale test, because you don't want to shock your system and all of your customers by making big changes. Yeah. So, that's pretty much it in terms of how at least I did customer research at Peach on a smaller scale.
Yes, I also did customer support. Like the day before we launched the Glowforge crowdfund campaign, which we thought was going to be much smaller than it was. We were like, gosh, we should probably have a way that like they could write into us and ask questions. So set up a Zendesk account real quick, and then that was my life for like the next 6 months until we built out a support team or customer success team, as we call them. And yes, I would echo that like every communication I write and every marketing decision, because we try to be at Glowforge customer centric in our marketing, rather than marketing with the product. We want to market with the customer, the user, the beautiful things they're making. And I don't think I could do that without my time in the trenches of customer support, because I know all the pain points, et cetera. And then also, yes, we did some surveys, which are as easy as Google Forms. And we were very lucky to have high engagement rates on those. And I think the biggest takeaway that we did a survey, I don't know, a couple months after our crowdfund, at which point almost no one had their machine or even any version of the machine. And it was like, what do you plan to do with it? And we learned at that point that somewhere around 80% of our customers plan to make money with their Glowforge. And we were like, wow, that's much higher than we would have guessed. We knew that some people were interested in creating a small business or being entrepreneurial in some way with the Glowforge, but that's huge. So that tells us we need to lead with that idea in our marketing. People are justifying the purchase of a huge, multi-$1,000 device because they think they're going to make money on it. And they very well will. But so now like I'm developing a new video campaign, and we will lead with things about making money, and then beyond that, I also would count as research for a hardware product would be our beta programs. I guess you could do beta with software as well, but beta programs, we did a couple different versions of beta where we had, I think, around 2,000 people apply, and it was really extensive application process, but we wanted to make sure that we were going to give people who give the beta opportunity to people who looked at it like a job, like it was really a duty to give us the best feedback they could. So we got, user experience feedback, technical feedback we needed, but also it helped a lot with marketing to see what they were using it for and what they wanted to use it for that we might have not known. It's interesting at any company how quickly you make assumptions and then are just like, well, customers are going to do this. And then it's like, well, where did you get that? What data backs that up? Who told you that? And so you find it's great if you can keep an open mind and really look to customers to inform what they're actually using the product for and not what you think they're using it for.
So I have some specific questions for you guys, but does anyone want to share one of their questions for any of our speakers first? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, how do you go about getting those people that want to come in, they really want to, contribute to making your product better, understanding their pain points? Like, is there any way you would incentivize them, or do you think people would just want to do that in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. Incentives are always going to yield higher survey results. Like if you have a $25 Amazon gift card as a result of completing a survey or whatnot. At Glowforge, I should have mentioned this in the last question too. Another way that we got to interact with our customers a lot and create a loyal group that was willing to give us feedback was by creating a community forum, which we did actually even before we launched. It's called community.glowforge.com, and there are just thousands of people on there on a daily basis for the last 2 years that are just willing to give us all this feedback. And they've really it's like a hangout for them that's just invaluable to us. And so that group of people we have this special relationship with where we wouldn't maybe have to incent them. They feel loyal to us and they feel, they feel like that they really have value. They've added value to the company and they feel like part of it in a way. But if we reach out to a larger group beyond the community, incentives, just small incentives like entering in a drawing definitely help.
We were a poor startup, so we couldn't incentivize people.
No, that's a good question because there are always two groups of customers that you're going to have. The ones that want to engage with you, they really love your product or really hate it. So they just want to be really vocal about it and they just want to give feedback. And those guys, you don't have to incentivize. But that really puts bias onto sort of what kind of feedback you get and what your direction would be. So what we had to do was actually reach out to people who typically don't engage with us to really get their feedback. What is the thought behind the silent majority that exists out there, right? So that's where you have to sort of provide the incentives. Gift cards work really well. So
sort of ties into the previous questions, but there's kind of this idea that data is king. How do you not suffer from like just analysis paralysis from all the information that you get?
I can speak to that, I think, from perhaps a unique perspective in an agency context. Does everybody remember the Pepsi and Kendall Jenner campaign? So the data would suggest that that was a smart move. Millennials are socially active and engaged. They like Kendall Jenner. What did I just say? Did I say the name right?
Yeah.
I was like, what? And so why wouldn't you be able to just kind of put those two things together? Pepsi's like, great, we'll just latch ourselves onto this moment because the data suggests that this would be a good campaign. I think they pulled it after a couple of hours. There was just complete outrage. What they did is they co-opted this really iconic, beautiful image from the civil rights movement, and they tried to use it to sell sugar water. It was inauthentic. And I think that if you don't have a strong core conviction, your data can often lead you astray. And I think the best marketing is telling the truth about who you are, what you do, and what your customers can expect. And I think the data can inform that, but it shouldn't drive it. Because if it drives it, it quickly turns into manipulation. And the market is not as dumb as you think. And what happens is you get a tremendous, whatever it is, Twitter backlash, or you're just going to get dragged through the media. And there were a lot of people who signed off on that spot, and it lost Pepsi a lot of money. So I think that data is super important. And if you are a marketer, you should have analytics as your second language, and having a sound measurement strategy is really important. But if you allow that data to drive every decision that you make, you will find yourself in, probably sitting with your counsel and talking about how to mitigate the damage that you've done for your brand.
No, I'm a little biased because I have a scientific background, and my previous role was like head of analytics at Peach. But data is important. It will help you inform a lot of your decisions. But I mean, I have to echo the sentiment of you have to have conviction or sort of vision to help you guide your decisions, or use just common sense. One example, I mean, this might be pretty dumb, but one of the things that we wanted to work on was how do we sort of increase the engagement of customers at Peach and get people to order more food more often, right? And no brainer, just send them what they typically order. If I send you, let's say, Izel's famous chicken, 5 times and you ordered all of those 5 times, oh my God, you love it, so I'm just gonna send it to you every day. I mean, data would suggest that that's a good idea, but you know that it's not. So you really have to balance out 3 things. It's the common sense, and 2, does this align with the vision of the company or what you're trying to do? And 3, if the data aligns with that, great. If not, then you want to rethink your choices.
I think the only thing I have to add, I don't have a great data related story, but I guess I would say as a marketer, and especially as a startup marketer, sometimes you end up in crisis management. And although the data would suggest that telling 10,000 customers that their Glowforge unit is shipping late would result in, cancellations and other negative things, you have to tell them that because that's the reality. So sometimes, like, as the marketer, you are the bearer of bad news, but it's just like you have to tell the truth, and you're the one to lead the company through that. And so it's really using your human people skills, human communication skills to, learn how to best communicate that message and make your customers, stay on board with you and get through these murky times with you. And although, the data would say that's a bad message to send you guys. So sometimes it's just things beyond your control.
Yeah, I just have one quick thing to add. I think oftentimes as a marketer, you forget that you are also a consumer and you stop thinking like a consumer. And so if you pause for a moment and you think about whether it's crisis communications or, rolling out new features for your product, by thinking just for a moment about some of your favorite brands and the ways in which they've had significant changes and how they've handled it and how you've liked it and how you haven't liked it in the past. So as a marketer, one of your greatest tools is the fact that you are also a consumer, you are a customer, you are a brand loyalist. And so bearing that in mind, because I think that there's this just kind of naturally happens as you pull away from your own product and you are kind of a little bit more clinical in the way that you approach what you do. But sometimes it's good just to kind of like pinch yourself and remind yourself that you too are a consumer and that that is a sharply honed skill that we all have.
Yeah, Dominic.
So you mentioned earlier about like the Kendall Jenner backlash, and then you talked about people having irrational hatred of your product and your company. So when or how do you listen to negative feedback?
You should listen to all feedback, but I guess in the same way that it's not just about kind of putting all of the feedback in a pivot table and seeing like, well, this is red feedback, this is yellow feedback, this is green feedback. I think it really taking it seriously and taking the time to try to get out the thing behind the thing. There's this quote, and I'm sure everybody's heard it, about Henry Ford said if you asked people what they wanted, they'd say they want a faster horse, but he was building a car, and people couldn't even imagine that that's what they wanted. And so I think in that same point that you brought up, you know, you're using, or I can't remember who said it, but it was really, really salient, your common sense, the data, and your conviction, and using that as the filter for any decision that you make, and the filter for interpreting all of that data and feedback. And then maybe from kind of a more product perspective, you can talk about how you actually execute against that. Because I don't have to do that anymore. I work at an agency. I just get paid for my ideas.
Yeah, no, filtering out negative feedback. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, there are two things. One, if they're your customer from before and they always complain, you kind of want to filter that out a little bit. But if they're, people who haven't complained before and now starting to, have a backlash, instead of taking things literally, just try to understand why they're backlashing. I think the example with the Henry Ford and, people wanting a faster horse is a good example, because their goal is trying to get from point A to point B faster, and that's what you deliver on. So if you hear people complaining and all they really want is not for example, a thing at Peach was people are complaining that our food was too expensive, and we thought, oh, okay, let's make food cheaper then, right? That actually didn't work out very well for us. People thought because it was cheaper, it was lower quality. The perception of quality actually went down, even though it's the same stuff. So when we dug deeper, what people wanted was they wanted to be wowed and delighted by our service, and they actually wanted more value, not necessarily cheaper. So trying to understand, sort of go a layer deeper than sort of what they're saying literally, to really understand, like, why are you saying this? What do you really want? I think is very important.
Yeah. At Glowforge, we ended up shipping our product about a year and change later than we initially promised. And so I've spent the past 2 years, working with the CEO to draft crisis communication several times. We've had several rough schedule updates, and thank goodness that those days are behind us and we're shipping, yay. But yeah, it's tough times. And how we handled it was, we basically created a platform for all the negative feedback that we knew was coming. We knew that people did not want to hear, like, shoot, it looks like it's going to be another 6 months. So we spent, hours on crafting the message, and that was another thing that I was able to do better because of the time that I spent in customer support, understanding what the pain points were, what this specific delay was going to mean to them, the things they were going to miss out on, the projects they weren't going to do, the wedding they weren't going to get to make their invites for, like, knowing that, really get, and I knew all it's sad. And so when what we do is we'd, send the schedule update as an email, but then on our forum, create a platform on which we'd host a live Q&A and post also the content of the email, so people had a place to come talk to us directly about their unhappiness. And it didn't make them happier, but we were there to listen. And I think the best thing to do with negative feedback is to not be defensive. I've really admired my CEO because being behind the scenes, know that there's been a lot of things that were beyond our control or were the fault of, this or that manufacturer or whatever. But like the customers don't need or want to hear that. And it's not going to make them forgive you, or it's not going to make their Glowforge arrive any sooner or their food taste any better or whatever it is. So I think it's just not being defensive, like owning the mistakes you've made, letting them say it. That's my biggest advice. And it's hard. There's been so many times I've even like typed an angry or a defensive response and just been like, that just felt good. No one will ever see this, but yeah.
All right, so kind of a next topic would be launching campaigns. So if you're at a startup, you're the only marketer, how do you get buy-in to launch new campaigns? A lot of the times just for the first time, when you don't really know the results that you're going to get.
How do you get buy-in?
Buy-in so that you have the budget, so that you have the go-ahead to launch something brand new.
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the benefits to being at a startup in that regard is this kind of fail fast, experiment a lot, iterate. And so if that is the culture, as long as you can demonstrate that you've thought carefully about this campaign that you're about to launch, you have a hypothesis for it. If we invest this is the outcome that we're predicting based on A, B, and C. Here are some analogous campaigns that other, like brands have run, and being able to kind of speak the language that's important to a CEO, like what's going to be the ROI. I guarantee you will not get buy-in if you can't answer that question. And it doesn't mean you have to be right, but the fact that you've kind of in earnest really thought about the campaign, what does it look like from ideation to execution? I think all of those things are really important. Now, I don't know what it looks like at a bigger brand, but I think that kind of pace, that tempo that you have at a startup kind of lends itself to that culture of experimentation, and it's less about being right and more about what did you try, how fast did you try it, and what did you learn from those experiments?
Yeah, no, experiments are a great way to sort of showcase on a very small scale, even in startup terms, to show, hey, this is working to a certain degree. So if we roll it out, it's going to produce X result. But another way you could do it to get buy-in is one thing that at least I had to do was you can really use common sense to like figure out, how much the things your campaign's going to cost and what your break-even case has to be. And if your break-even case actually looks very promising, let's say, hey, I want to run this new sort of sponsoring a champion campaign who's our brand champions and give them incentives to actually speak out a little more. If that only costs, let's say, $50 to break even, we only have to see 0.5% increase in sales, like that's a no-brainer, right? So giving a break-even case that actually looks attainable will get you buy-in really quickly. And if you're sort of on the edge of that break-even case saying, oh yeah, this could be worth it or not worth it, really just sit down and explain to your founders or the key board members to say, hey, the company, try to align your sort of campaign with the direction that company is trying to go in. The company's trying to, achieve goal X, Y, and Z. This campaign I'm trying to, lead will help you get towards that. Yes, the break-even case doesn't look great, but it'll still make sense while trying to help you get towards that sort of company vision. I think that's very important.
Yeah, just one more thing, and then I'll pass it over to you. Is I think you raising these kind of top line objectives for a business, you should always be able to tie your marketing objectives to the larger operational and organizational objectives, and so your ability to clearly articulate that will go a long way in getting buy-in as well.
I don't think I have anything to add. Yeah, I would have just been repeating it. Yeah, experiments. Yeah.
All right, so I have some of their favorites. Oh yeah, Dominic, do you want to add on?
Yeah, well, you guys were talking about it. It got me thinking. It's not a singular effort to do marketing. It's a team effort. So how does the CEO or the COO, whoever, empower you to be able to do your job effectively?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So when I got my role changed to head of marketing at Peach, there was no marketing department, and what I had to do was essentially get buy-in from the board members and the C-suite that, hey, marketing is important at Peach. Here are my sort of business cases, comps of other startups, and sort of what I'm looking to spend in terms of budget and the break-even case that I would showcase. And once they saw that and they got buy-in, they're like, okay, so what do you need to execute on all this, right? And you sort of lay out what kind of campaigns you want to run, what the requirements are for executing, time, man hours needed for either working on the digital side or sending people out for on-site events, for example, and you just lay all of your sort of quarterly plan out. And I would say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z for that, for me to execute. And that's tied into the cost of the campaign as well. And they said, okay, we'll support you in doing that by approving the budget so you can open a new position, hire people, and so on. So.
Yeah. I'm very lucky at Glowforge to have a CEO who is a brilliant marketer himself. And and so I haven't had too much trouble getting support. It's more kind of the opposite, we need for the CEO to maybe not run marketing forever, right? Because he's so dedicated to the product and has such a strong opinion about how we should market it, and wants his hands in things, and that's wonderful because he is the type of person that you can bring an idea to and he makes it better, and that's awesome and valuable. But that won't scale. The CEO can't run marketing forever, in theory. So kind of the opposite problem. But I would say now that we just brought on a new head of marketing, and then I'm under her as senior marketing manager, and there are some elements of marketing that as we're like working out, 2018 budget and stuff, there are some elements that we want to do, like maybe we want to do a presence at San Diego Comic-Con, or say, and some of those things are kind of hard to measure the effectiveness. So I'd say anytime you're trying to justify marketing spend to executives, find something that you can measure. Like along with your San Diego Comic-Con presence, you should run some kind of social engagement campaign so that you have numbers to choose, so that you can point to an amazing Instagram engagement, or, giveaways that direct people to a URL that you can track, so that you have some numbers to point to, even though most marketers know brand awareness is valuable. You can't not do it, but it can feel expensive and hard to measure.
I think one thing to just kind of mention is that, because it made me think about when you have a CEO who is a marketer. If you go to a startup, there are, I don't want to oversimplify this, but there are product-led businesses, there are marketing-led businesses, there are design-led businesses. And if you go to a product-led business, you have to know that you will have a greater battle to face as a marketer than you will if you're at a marketing-led business. And so I think in your interview process, when you're kind of identifying career opportunities for yourself, knowing what type of business it is really important, because that's going to set the tone for what your relationship is going to be like with the leadership, and it will kind of adjust the incline for how difficult it's going to be for you.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah.
So how do you interview for that?
Yeah,
If you're evaluating companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's the in between the lines things. There are questions that you can ask, but it's more, even just like look at what they're currently investing in. Where did the founders come from? Joy is founded by two guys from Microsoft and one from Adobe. So that's a product-led company. So I think you can kind of do your own deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning, is that the right? Research? Yeah, one of those things. Use your intuition as well, and also look at what are their existing marketing efforts. What do they look like? How much does it look like they're investing in marketing? Or asking them, like, what I want to see the P&L. Like, how much are you spending on your marketing efforts? And I think those things are tells for what their existing commitment is to marketing. And I don't know if anybody has anything.
Yeah. Jay, you have a marketing background and you just started a company. Is it going to be marketing-led or product-led? And why?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're a product company for now. But one thing that I wanted to add on, sort of, how do you interview the founders, right? I think that's a really good question. When you interview, especially for a startup, as much as they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. And you get to ask them questions. Some of the questions that I asked were, what's your vision for the company? And they sort of give you a little bit of detail. And you sort of dig deeper into that. Well, how are you trying to achieve that? How would you increase your engagement with the customers? What do you want your customers to feel like? What do they, what do you want your brand to represent? What do you want people to feel or associate your brand with? And by asking these questions and hearing their answers, you can tell right away if they care about marketing at all, or they just have no idea and they want your help to figure that out, or if they just have zero interest at all. So,
Cool. All right, I think we have time for one more question if someone wants to throw one out for our panel here. One more, yeah.
Sorry to keep
No,
asking
you're asking good
questions.
questions.
I was kind of surprised when I asked the question earlier about if they can enable you in any way. I was expecting to hear things like they give you a brand guide, like this is how you represent our company, what is it not to do, or is that more marketing's department and you make that up?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the stage of business and what's important to them. So when I was at Joy, I had to go rogue a couple of times. It was more like ask for forgiveness rather than permission. As long as I wasn't needing to shake loose too much budget, we didn't have a brand guide, and I couldn't get our lead designer was super busy, slammed with product, and so I found a freelancer and I oversaw the project, and that made my job so much easier because rather than having to articulate all the nuances of the brand to other contractors, now I have this document, this single source of truth for what do we look like, what do we sound like, how do we talk about ourselves. And so I think some places that exists, and other places you have to kind of forge that path for yourself.
no, that's a good point. So when we thought about support, we thought like financial support or getting buy-in or man-hour support. But in terms of sort of skills guidance or what we need to do at a startup, it's really hard. Like if you're a pre-series, like if you have Series A funding and you're trying to go into Series B, that's like a transition period for a startup where they start to develop all of these identities. So if you're pre-Series B, you kind of have to be the leader to develop all of that, right? I think that's sort of the stage that we spend a lot of our time on, so our answers differed. But if you're post-Series B, I think that's when a lot of the guidelines are set. There's a marketing leadership to provide you that support. Can't speak for that because I haven't worked for a company in that size range. But at T-Mobile, you have all these great resources. If you need help, you just need to ask and they provide it to you. And because when companies hire you, they want you to be successful. It's not like they're trying to make you fail. They want you to be a great employee, and they love it when you ask questions trying to learn. So there will be support.
The main thing I have to add to that is when I started at Glowforge, really small, no marketing, and then worked directly under the CEO for 2 years, and he increasingly had less and less time to spend with me on a weekly basis. And so developing kind of processes or things like a language guide made it easier for me to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. Like at the beginning, he was reviewing, every social media post. But then once we had, once we'd established some, we'd agreed upon different language that we liked, a voice that we liked, that was something that we could point to and say, well, we agreed, like this is, and of course that can be a changing, like living document, but I felt like having something like that was a way for me to be able to move quickly and not have executive sign off on everything, which would be insane. So.
Cool. All right, thanks for the last question. Let's thank our panel here.